How are you doing?
I'm really well. I'm honored to have you here and to have this opportunity to have a chat with you about your forthcoming chat at the Sound Studies Institute at U of A. This is really exciting and it's a good opportunity, and it'll be really fascinating for people who tune in. This is a little preview of what's to come, I guess, for foreshadowing what's to come on Valentine's Day, no less. Spend your Valentine's Day. At least the precursor to the evening with the Sound Studies Institute. That's wonderful. There's nothing more romantic than music, one would suggest, or sound.
In general, no. Mostly a lot of the stuff. Mostly from ballads to instrumental music. There's romantic and etc. Where we have very, very sort of effective connections to music. They actually specifically in sort of inspirations of love or inspiring moments of love and romance as well. So I think that there's maybe our conversation would be a good prelude to that. Because it'd be really nice to have that
Yeah, I might
to be
get
able
it.
to offer that for other people. Yes, 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 yes.
You might get into that tangent on Valentine's Day. And I was looking at your biography in relation to this work, and it suggests that you work at the intersection of Orisha worship, hip hop studies, and multimodal ethnography. Wow, that's all I can say. Those are some seemingly deep and loose threads to have to tie together. Can you unpack that a little bit for us? What inspired you to get into this kind of work?
I think most of it has to do with lived experience. I'm from Havana, Cuba,
Hmm.
and if I go for each of the sort of say tributaries that sort of converge in my work, the Lukumi Odisha Ifa practice comes from lineage. I'm a Igbo descendant, born in Havana. My great grandparents were among the last group of recent arrived slaves from Nigeria. So that connection to Orisha worship as well is very close in my blood, on my father's side and on my mom's side. Me becoming initiated into Orisha worship was the one thing that led into me, entering the world of hip hop and becoming a producer for Afro-Cuban rap in Havana, and then working, until now as someone who's done production on the ground, mainly preparing, artists in a sort of workshop style for live performances. Moving from the time of hip hop practice in Havana, which is sort of roughly from 1995, 1996 was actually when I made my first beat, sort of, and then to 2004, 2005, when I moved from Havana to Edinburgh to do a master's in sound design, where I actually wanted to take time to think about what I had done in Havana. And this is sort of where my interest in sound starts. It was mainly when I took time to think about it theoretically, and going around Edinburgh with binaural microphones, recording the city and listening to Edinburgh. That then when I went back to Havana for a small period of time, I realized that something had changed in the way the city sounded back then. Since then, I went on then to fulfill a PhD in social anthropology at the University of St. Andrews. And my focus was basically trying to grapple with those ideas of what I had lived, and trying to understand basically what I describe as Afro-Cubanity. And the way to basically unpack it is what it is like to be Afro-Cuban in Havana today.
So I can hear the sound of bagpipes echoing off the walls of houses in Havana. Your experience is very
No, this is
diverse.
really interesting. This is really interesting. Living in Edinburgh for 17 years, the bagpipes is something that I'm very familiar with myself.
Right?
But I think if we think about Scotland, I think that this will be a really good way to talk then about Havana and what I mean by this sort of sounded ways to understand life in other places. I feel like the bagpipes and what they mean in terms of the Scottish sort of landscapes of the city, I feel like it sort of implies certain subjectivities.
Yeah.
They're still
Yeah.
present
Yeah.
as the way in which people live in Scotland, right? When we think about that, there's a way in which the bagpipes continue to exist and been there since they were invented, right, in Edinburgh. But then in the case of Havana, we have similar ways in which the city sounds
Hmm.
And by referring to similar signifiers like the bagpipes, we have rumba or drums or drumming. There's actually about ceremonial drumming that's related directly to Yoruba Orisha worship that we can hear in the cities. I'm interested more in the ways in which people sort of live through sound and what they signify through sound that's not projected or performed. It's actually just anxieties that have to do with what we hear, but it's not really it's not tangible physically.
I want to ask you something, and this is have you been back to Cuba recently?
2018 was the last time I was there doing field work. I had this really interesting encounter coming back from the center of basically Parque Céspedes in Santiago de Cuba, walking down, and there was a man in front of me who had a backpack and he had a portable speaker inside the backpack. And he was walking. I was like, wait, and he had it on, he was playing reggaeton music. I was like, well, so why don't you just put headphones on?
Yeah.
He said, no, no, I'd rather have the speaker because then I can sort of be aware of whatever else is going on around me. It was basically late at night.
And it blends
in. Portability is something. Portability is another kind of really important issue in both, specifically cities like Santiago de Cuba and Havana, and what you hear in their sonic sort of character or audible character, if you want to talk about it.
And there have been a lot of changes in the social political structure in recent years, in Cuba specifically. Does this recolor the sound in a place like Havana?
Yes, this shift, in particular, the times of hardship. That moment when I went back, I realized that the way, or let me just say it differently, the music that my neighbors listened to, and I discovered they would basically listen to the same music I was sampling for Rap Cubano. Somehow it changed when I returned from Edinburgh, and they were playing reggaeton. And reggaeton then is not exactly the change of the music, but then what exactly that music implies in the concept of socialist Cuba. And I'll leave it to that. But I look at it rather than just the music itself. I look at it about how the city sounds and how my neighbors shifted from playing boleros to listening to reggaeton a lot more louder, like way louder. So the decibels is also an increase of this critical point, or critical, let's say, this sort of amplification becomes a very strong signifier of this new turn in Cuban society and what it means for what's actually happening, the kind of life that people are engaged in nowadays in Havana. And the precarity, I mean, I think the main point in this conversation is how do we understand, or that we should understand, Cuba's return to the Caribbean, which is something that we need to deal with specifically. The fact that Cuba is returning to the Caribbean, Cuba is plunging back into the Caribbean in reality. And in sound is probably one of the most important signifiers of that. We need to basically pay close attention to how people sound and the sound of life. The life of Cuba itself was sort of suspended in this sort of socialist bubble that I actually benefited from a lot myself and my parents too. And this is it's very, very difficult moment of crisis where people talked about abandonment, state's abandonment of citizens. The main point is just the idea that Cuba is returning to the Caribbean. I feel like it's like a fish, and then people in it just plunge cyclically. Every time there's a crisis, we're plunging back into the Caribbean.
Right. Well, thank you. And we are honored that you're bringing that perspective, which is so powerful and deserves to have light shed on it and deserves to be heard, as it were, in a tangled web of sounds. And we are honored to have you do a live stream coming up on Valentine's Day. At the Sound Studies Department at U of A. We'll go out. What's on your turntable at the moment? Your proverbial. What do you listen to?
On my turntable, what's on my turntable right now has, can I show it to you? It has Los Españoles. It's a record that I found at Henry's record 2 weeks ago. It's a Polydor record, and it's called Under the Southern Is it skies? It is Los Españoles. So it's like music of that time where it's just definitely a mariachi kind of style of thing, but that's what I'm into on vinyl. I also, the other record that I got, just to go back to the Afro-Cuban conversation, is this wonderful record by Mongo Santa Maria, which I would make sure that everyone grabs it. It's Explosion by Mongo Santa Maria.
Well, thank you for sharing your voice, your thoughts, and your music.
Thank you so much, Tony, for the conversation.
My pleasure.